In the Amish church, baptism is meant to be a joyful surrender. It is described as the moment a young person chooses faith, community, and lifelong belonging. But no one speaks much about what happens when a girl's heart does not follow the path her steps are expected to take. I'm Eliza. I grew up in an Old Order Amish settlement in Pennsylvania, where life moved in rhythms that felt as old as the fields we worked. My childhood was structured but gentle in its own way. School in a one-room building, barefoot summers, the sound of my mother's quilting frame creaking in the evenings. Faith was never presented as a question. It was the air around us. We did not debate belief. We lived inside it. Baptism in our world was not something that happened to babies. It was something you chose as a young adult, usually between 18 and 22. That choice mattered deeply because once you were baptized, you were fully accountable to the church Ordnung, the unwritten code that governed everything from dress to technology to social separation. Baptism was the doorway into full membership. It was also the doorway into discipline. Most outsiders assume Amish youth are pressured or forced into baptism. The truth is more layered. No one dragged us to the font. No one issued ultimatums. But the weight of expectation was everywhere, in sermons, in family conversations, in the quiet assumption that of course you would choose this life. Refusing baptism was technically allowed, but it carried consequences that were social, emotional, and spiritual all at once. I remember the first time I realized refusal was even possible. I was 19, sitting on a wooden bench after Sunday service while the older girls talked about upcoming instruction classes. These were the classes you attended before baptism, months of teaching about doctrine, obedience, humility, and separation from the world. One girl, Miriam, was unusually quiet. When someone asked if she would be joining, she hesitated just long enough for the silence to thicken. She said softly, "I don't think I'm ready." No one argued. No one scolded. But the conversation shifted around her like water moving past a stone. Later, walking home, I asked my mother what happened if someone never got baptized. She answered plainly, "Then they are not part of the church." Her tone wasn't harsh, it was factual, like explaining the seasons, but I felt something settle heavily in my chest. Because in Amish life, church was not just Sunday worship. Church was family weddings, shared labor, mutual aid, burial grounds, and belonging itself. To refuse baptism was to remain on the edge of your own people. The belief behind baptism is rooted in adult accountability. The Amish hold that faith must be chosen, not inherited. Infant baptism would deny the individual's free will. So young people are given a period called Rumspringa, a time when they may experience limited exposure to the outside world before deciding whether to join the church. Many imagine Rumspringa as wild rebellion. In most communities, it is far quieter, some social gatherings, maybe different clothing, occasionally exploring technology. Its real purpose is discernment. But discernment carries risk, because once you realize another life exists, returning wholeheartedly becomes more complex. I watched that complexity unfold in Miriam's life over the next year. She continued living at home. She wore plain clothes. She attended church, but she did not enter instruction classes. When Baptism Sunday came, a day filled with white coverings and solemn vows, she sat in the back, not among the candidates, but among the unmarried youth and unbaptized adults. Afterward, families gathered for meals. Laughter filled the air. But I noticed Miriam left early, walking home alone down the gravel road. That was my first concrete glimpse of the quiet separation that begins long before anyone says a word. Refusal does not trigger shunning, not officially. Shunning applies only to baptized members who break vows. An unbaptized girl cannot be shunned because she never joined, yet the social reality can feel similar in softer, less formal ways. She is not disciplined, but she is not fully embraced either. Another memory stays with me even more vividly. It was a summer evening quilting circle at my aunt's house. Women of all ages sat around the frame, stitching and talking. Miriam arrived late and took a corner seat. Conversation flowed easily until someone mentioned upcoming weddings, all couples who had been baptized that spring. One older woman said, not unkindly, "It's good to see young people committing." The word committing hung in the air. No one looked directly at Miriam, but the message reached her all the same. I watched her hands slow over the fabric. Moments like that were how pressure worked in our world, indirect, polite, but unmistakable. The cultural expectation to be baptized exists for several reasons. Faith is one, certainly, but unity is another. The Amish community depends on shared obedience. Adult baptism ensures that everyone living within the Ordnung has chosen it willingly. Without that shared vow, the structure would weaken. From the church's perspective, baptism protects the community's spiritual and social integrity. From a young woman's perspective, it can feel like choosing between belonging and personal uncertainty. Emotionally, the impact varies widely. Some girls feel deep peace when they are baptized. They describe it as relief, a settling into purpose, a closing of questions. I knew women like that. Their faith was steady and joyful, and they built meaningful lives inside the community. But for girls who hesitate, the emotional landscape is more complicated. Refusal can bring loneliness long before any formal consequences appear. Courtship becomes difficult since most Amish men seek baptized wives. Social invitations subtly decrease. Conversations grow careful. You are still present, but no longer central. I remember a conversation I had with Miriam not long before I left the community myself. We were walking past harvested fields at dusk, the air carrying that dry, earthy smell of late autumn. I asked her gently why she had not chosen baptism. She took a long time to answer. Finally, she said, "I don't want to promise something my heart is unsure about." Her voice wasn't rebellious. It was thoughtful, almost apologetic. She told me she still believed in God. She still loved her family, but she struggled with the permanence of the vow, the idea that one decision at 19 would define her entire life. "I wish I could choose slowly," she said. That sentence stayed with me for years, because Amish baptism does not allow for slow choosing. Once you step forward, there is no stepping back without severe consequence. Refusing baptism, then, becomes the only honest path for someone uncertain. But honesty carries cost. Families often respond with quiet grief rather than anger. Parents may worry about their daughter's eternal future, not just her social standing. Prayer becomes more frequent, conversations grow more earnest, yet love usually remains. I never saw Miriam cast out of her home. She still shared meals, worked alongside her siblings, and cared for younger children. The fracture was not in daily function, but in future trajectory. She would not marry within the church unless she later chose baptism. She might eventually leave. Everyone understood this without needing to say it aloud. What happens to girls who never get baptized varies. Some remain lifelong unbaptized members of the household, helping family, aging within the margins of the community. Some eventually choose baptism later than usual, after years of reflection. Others leave entirely, joining Mennonite groups, other Christian denominations, or secular life beyond Amish society. Miriam's story followed that third path, though slowly. In her mid-20s, she began working for an English family as a house helper, something more common for unbaptized women. Exposure to the outside world widened her sense of possibility. Within 2 years, she moved out permanently. There was no dramatic break, no confrontation, just a gradual physical distance that mirrored the spiritual one that had begun years earlier. The day she left, her mother cried quietly at the kitchen table while folding laundry, not because Miriam had done something wrong, but because refusal of baptism had finally completed its long arc. It is important to say that not every refusal leads to departure. Some women live peacefully on the edges, maintaining family ties and cultural identity without full church membership. And not every baptized woman feels trapped. Many experience genuine fulfillment in faith, marriage, motherhood, and communal life. My reflections come not from judgment, but from witnessing the range of outcomes that exist behind a decision outsiders often view too simply. One dimension that is rarely discussed is how refusal affects a girl's inner sense of self over time. Without baptism, you occupy a prolonged in-between state, no longer a child, not fully an adult within the church. Decisions about dress, work, and courtship remain ambiguous. Authority structures apply loosely, but not completely. Some girls find freedom in that space. Others find restlessness. I felt shades of that restlessness myself before I eventually left. Though I was baptized, my doubts came later. Watching girls like Miriam made me realize how much courage it took to pause before making a vow I had rushed into. There is a quiet integrity in refusing baptism when your conviction is uncertain, even if the cost is belonging. Looking back now, years after leaving, I see baptism refusal less as rebellion and more as discernment expressed under pressure. In communities where identity and faith are inseparable, hesitation becomes a radical act, not loud, but deeply consequential. I sometimes think about Miriam when I pass churches now, both Amish and English. I wonder whether she ever found the slow choosing she longed for, and I think about the girls still sitting on wooden benches, listening to instruction lessons, weighing promises that will shape the rest of their lives. Some will step forward with peace, some will step forward with hidden doubt, and a few will remain seated, hearts honest, futures uncertain, belonging held at a careful distance. If there is one thing I have learned, it is that refusal of baptism is not a single moment of decision. It is the beginning of a long unfolding, relationally, spiritually, and emotionally. It reshapes how a girl is seen, how she sees herself, and where her path is likely to lead. Yet even within that tension, there is dignity, because faith, to mean anything at all, must be chosen freely, even when the choice is to wait. I share this not to criticize the world I came from, but to illuminate a corner of it that is often misunderstood. Behind every refusal is not defiance, but a story, one shaped by conscience, courage, fear, love, and the universal human desire to belong without surrendering honesty. And if you have ever stood at the edge of an expectation you weren't sure you could fulfill, then perhaps you understand Miriam more than you realize.